Hello everybody, Rob Viso here. Welcome to Big City Night Recording Studios in beautiful Lucerne. Want to see some magic? Come on. Woo!
All right, so Rob, tell us a bit about your room here. Give us some, what happened? How'd you stumble into this place? First of all, where the hell are we?
Well, we are, welcome everybody, welcome Marek, in beautiful Lucerne, Switzerland. And we're in the middle of the city, basically, on the first floor. And this room was built as a voiceover recording studio for a bigger studio in Lucerne. And we took over these rooms in 2008. So it started as a rehearsal space for a band in the other room, and I was mixing and recording in this room. And then it turned into a 5.1 mixing on the other room, and now doing all the mastering and some mixing stuff in this room since 2008 now.
Nice.
So that's what it is.
I see it's a funky shape, and you've done quite an extensive amount of work with sound control. So you want to tell us how that journey?
Well, the thing is, it was built around the idea that it was just a control room for voiceover stuff. So there was a pair of monitors, tiny monitors that would just monitor the voice and some music, and it was just basic room insulation and bass trapping and absorption in the room. But once I went into mastering, this needed a whole reshape. This needed a huge reshape. So I hired this guy, Markus Sehner, great acoustician here in Switzerland. He looked at the room and he said, "You're fucked."
Find another space.
Yeah, because he said, hey, the room is not symmetrical. There's
very complicated.
Odd construction. Materials on this side is a dry wall. Right. On this side is a concrete wall.
Okay.
So it was a big mess, and so we built it like step by step. Putting bass absorption in, measuring, putting some more absorption in, measuring, putting diffusion in, measuring. But the thing is, I learned so much in this room about what happens if you put a bass trap here, if you put it there, if you move the speakers 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters, if you move them closer to you, if you move them back, if you create a midfield thing, if you create a far field thing, that was great. It was a struggle, but I learned so much from this. But maybe I can't use any of the knowledge of this room in other rooms because it's every time it's
unique.
Different. It's
right.
unique. It's different.
Oh, unique is good. Yeah. So how did you get into mastering to begin with? You started as a recording engineer, and then
I started classically as a recording engineer, where it happened in the 90s, where I was rehearsing in my space. I was playing the drums, and in another rehearsal room next to me was a guy setting up his drums and a couple of mics to record on a 4-track machine, the classic 4-track, 8-track Fostex machine.
Yes.
So he asked me, "Listen, can you come over and set up the preamp level into the tape? Because I'm going to play the snare drum, I'm going to play the kick drum and everything." They were recording demos. That was 94, 95. And so I was sitting there and just, okay, what is this? This is a tape machine, okay. It had like 4 tracks or 8 tracks, I don't remember exactly. And he just said, "Yeah, this is the preamp level, just crank up the level so the snare drum channel, the snare drum signal goes into the red or a bit more or like that." And
analog cassette tape. Man.
Yeah,
so
analog cassette tape.
We kiss the red for sure.
And I would drive that thing. He would hit a couple of notes, and then we would play back the tape. And I remember to this day listening back to that snare drum on that tape, and I was like, "Oh, okay. That was the snare drum in the room, and now I'm listening to the snare drum in here. Right. It sounds fantastic on that cassette tape," and it sparked. That's when it sparked.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something's changing, and I have the power to change it.
Yeah, and the whole, of course. I mean, with turning on one knob, all those questions, came in. It was an explosion in my head. Like, okay, but what's going to happen if I change this knob? If I change that knob? If I move the mic? That thing?
And then years later, you've got this addiction.
And years later, here we're sitting, talking about thousands and thousands of dollars worth of A to D and D to A and everything. And it's incredible.
You've got two screens here.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain sort of why you have these two screens?
Well, these two screens are hooked up to two different computers. This is the playback system. This is the recording system. This is where all the mix files, all the recorded files are mixed in Pro Tools, or the mixes are played out of Pro Tools into the D-Day and then goes through the analog chain and gets recorded through the Dangerous 80 plus into the seconds. So sometimes you would have a 44.1 playback file, and then I always go into 88.2 into the second system. So I can have different sets of sample rate conversions running and not interact, you know.
And 88.2 is your choice?
88.2 is my choice because it's a sweet spot for the kind of equalizers, the high shelf shapes I'm using. It was just the best sounding number. 88.2 just sounded very musical, shiny, very transparent, and not harsh, not... there was a huge difference,
cool.
And especially with this X transformer backs shape, it was just beautiful.
I mean, it is true that certain, like people will buy an inexpensive interface and they'll want to record at the highest sample rate, 192, and that little interface really can't do that very well. It actually sounds better at lower sample rates because it's easier for it. So it's interesting how you're talking about listening to sample rates, because there's factual evidence behind that.
Yeah, well, the thing is that when I listened to that, and I was all alone when I was doing those tests, my production partner wasn't here or anything. I was just flipping through the sample rates and then listening to it, and I wasn't able to base that on any facts, but just the feel,
the emotion,
and the emotion of listening to it. Cranking the treble on the shelf and listening at 44, 44.1, 48, 88.2, and how did it feel? And I stopped at 88.2. It was like 88 was just perfect. That was it. Yeah, it was a feel thing. Yeah.
So that's your chain on. You have two inputs on the Convert 80 Plus.
Yeah.
And so that's input one. That's your workflow. And then you said you're using input two. Some mastering engineers use it for two different D to A's to flip between input one and input two, but you're actually using input two for a completely different signal path.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
The turntable system, my turntable is hooked up to the input two, straightly wired from the phono preamp into the equalizer and then into the 80 plus, because I'm digitizing some vinyl for high-end vinyl collectors, a couple of them, and that was the thing I was looking for. When you guys came up with the two inputs, it was like, all right,
so that's
very interesting.
So it's turntable, phono preamp, EQ. Okay, is your signal chain. Tell us a little bit about the vinyl. Like, what are you getting from vinyl? Why is it important? Why would somebody care? Tell us.
Well, the thing is that some of these people, they have these massive collections. They have some beautiful first pressings, and they don't want to spin them all the time. It's this funny thing, you know, they have a first pressing, they have a turntable, they love to listen to music on vinyl, but they don't want to spin it all the time because it's too valuable.
They're going to wear it out.
Yeah, exactly. So they are looking for ways to play back those records and not wear them out too much. So
and not stream off Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. And that was not the best option, because the thing was, they are so connected emotionally to those records that a Spotify file or an MP3 or a high resolution file is not that record, with the idiosyncrasies and everything that is on that record. So they want to be able to listen to the sound of that record, but in a more convenient way. You know, it's kind of weird, but it makes sense. But it makes sense somehow.
I'd love to hear some of those. And do you have to clean any of it up, or is it just you're just doing straight transfers?
There's one of them. One of them wants it just straight through. He wants to listen to everything.
Clicks
how
and
it was,
pops,
yeah,
imperfections,
exactly.
whatever.
And
That would make me nuts to hear the click always in
Right.
the same place.
right, but that's maybe what people are. You know, they're so used to it that that stuff became part of the recording.
Right.
It's weird,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it
No,
became
no,
part
it's,
of the.
absolutely.
I know exactly after that word or after that chorus, that pop comes in, you know,
yeah.
and everything was like, yeah, okay, whatever you want, man. And some of the other just, I have freehand. I can restore everything. I can declick and depop, and that's really fun.
And what are you using for those tools? Is that Isotope? Or?
I use Isotope, Restoration Suite in Isotope. Works really, really well for me. And unless it's, I mean, heavy stuff, you know, it's heavily scratched or
Yeah, of course.
so dusty and so worn out that you can't get rid of all the distortions and everything, you know.
Yeah.
But usually it's amazing what you can do with a beautiful first pressing, recorded straight through the stuff, analog stuff, and then do some restoration. It's fantastic. Yeah? It's beautiful.
Do you do the de-staticfying the record with the nitrogen? Do you do one of those?
No, I clean them.
Okay.
I clean the records. I have a cleaning machine at home right now, and I clean them, and then I play them. But I never did the anti-static thing.
Yeah,
no. I didn't do it. No.
Talking to Jeff Powell when they were doing that Dylan record, you know, that the one-off they sold for like 1.5 million or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They got a whole setup with a gun and nitrogen and they would go nuts.
I read about that whole thing, and I saw the video where he explained the whole process.
Yeah.
I mean, that was next level.
Yeah.
That was next level restoration. That was
He's fun.
absolutely incredible how they did it.
He's a great dude. You and I were talking a little bit about obviously you can run this thing as transparently as you want. You have the optional true hardwire bypass color circuits, and then you were talking about the transformer and the emphasis circuit. You want to tell us a little bit about how you use those?
Well, what I heard about is that it was this whole science about what it does to the treble or to the transients and everything. You know, how it smoothes stuff out. And I don't know what it does exactly, but for me, it sounds like you're cranking the treble, and it doesn't sound like your normal equalizer treble. It gets smoother and smoother. You know, it gets open and transparent and clear. But at the same time, probably the transformer gets hit, you know, in a certain way, and so it gets smoother and nicer. And I rarely crank it up more than a third or something like that. But I had one or two masters. I had to crank it up. I tried to, and I did it, and it was amazing what it did. You know, it was like this sweet EQ thing.
Yeah, you use it as you need it, dependent upon the program
Amazing.
you get.
Amazing.
Cool. So, talking about program that you get, how do you, when you're mastering in a perfect Rob bubble, what would you get from the client? How would they deliver it, and what levels? Tell us a little bit about what you'd love in your fantasy of receiving the product.
Well, the thing is that even young engineers now are unless it's somebody that is total caveman mode and never heard about peak levels and maximum digital levels and stuff like that. They're very well informed how to deliver masters. That's
great to hear.
That's incredible. That's something that a couple of years back, in my time, it was more of a hassle, you know, because it was like, yeah, nobody knew exactly how would you deliver a DAT tape or a half-inch master tape at what level or whatever. And nowadays, I'm pretty shocked about how much knowledge they have because of YouTube, because of those audio influencers and mastering videos and everything. That stuff doesn't get squashed that much anymore.
Great.
Like a couple of years back.
Yeah.
So I very rarely have to explain them. Listen, this was too loud, or you shouldn't mix in the box at -18. It's just not necessary. You can push up the volume a little bit more. No, it's pretty, I mean, very, very easy.
Cool.
Obviously, don't squash it too much. If you have a limiter on your master bus, send me a master with the limiter and without the limiter. Sometimes it's great, so it's not that good, or it's not necessary at all. But it's very rarely that I get a master, a mix that is fucked up.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's good advice to send it with and without the limiters
Yeah.
and two versions of it. And what average level would you like to see as a target?
I really don't care that much about the peak level. It's more about the RMS in the signal. You know, how much loudness it has, because everybody wants it loud.
Still?
Pretty loud. And sometimes I get masters that just don't have that crest factor, that perfect crest factor, to manipulate them in.
Is the space between your peak and
Yes,
average.
exactly. And that thing is too low, but they expect a loud master. So the thing is that they have too much margin between the loudness of the track and the peak level. So I'm gonna have to crank that thing up, and it's gonna destroy the mix. It's gonna destroy the dynamic. If you mix loud and you build in dynamic, I can crank out those last 3 dB, 4 dB. But if you deliver a master like 1980 with like 14 dB of peak level, you know, between the loudness and the loudest peak, I mean, what do you expect is gonna happen to the snare drum? Or to the kick drum? It's gonna squash it. You know? It's gonna, but that doesn't vary very much anymore.
And then what do they want for your output? Are you preparing different master outputs for Spotify versus Apple Music?
The only difference I do is when I deliver to vinyl, when I make vinyl masters and when I make CD masters.
Okay.
I obviously deliver like -1 dB for all the streaming platforms. I really don't. I don't go and make one for iTunes Music and for Spotify a different master. It's the same master. But with vinyl, I just check that the volume is not over, is around 0 dB VU. You know. I do that thing. And for CD, obviously, I crank it up a little bit. It's not -1 dB, it's -0.3, 0.1, whatever, you know, it's still that thing. But no, for streaming platforms, I'm not doing any different mastering or peak level master for.
Okay, cool. I see you have the clip guard activated on the convert.
Yep.
You're using clip guard?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. And the beautiful thing is that it's one of the few converters that you can drive really hard. Sometimes it's so nice. I wasn't able to do that with another converter. I had a blue converter, and that was not possible to drive it very hard. And believe it or not, sometimes it's a part of the master sound that certain customers like. When I drive it very hard, it kind of shaves off a little bit of the snare drum. It shaves off a little bit of the more intense peaks.
Yeah, it's working as a limiter.
And they like that.
Yeah.
You know, they like that they say something happened to the snare drum, but I like it, you know. And it's this shading, it's this clipping, it's this and
Cool.
that's absolutely fantastic with the loss.
Great.
Beautiful.
Well, brother, anything else you want to share?
Let me think about it. Well, obviously, keep listening to beautiful music. Crack those volumes. That's everything.
Killer. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Good times.
Fantastic.